Hi everyone, I'd like to thank SG Tech for having us here today to share about the topic, Digital Trust in the Built Environment Ecosystem. My name is Ken, and I'm responsible for driving strategic business engagement here in APAC. And today with me, we have three very experienced technologists in the built environment. First, Brett. He is personally involved in the digitalization of many infrastructure projects in Australia. And to my right, there's Khalil from Boustead Projects. He is instrumental in driving digital transformation in Boustead, and he's a key agent of change for our built environment here in Singapore. And last but not least, Samuel. He is the key driver in public sector. He's driving digital transformation in LTA infrastructure project. And as of March this year, he has helped LTA achieve ISO 19650 certification. So the topic today will be, even as the built environment copes with the challenges arising from COVID-19, the crisis has actually increased collaboration across the whole value chain. There is an opportunity to accelerate the digitalization push to raise productivity across the built environment value chain. At the heart of digitalization, there is a trust challenge that we want the convenience of digital tools that brings to the table, but at the same time, we are uncomfortable with sacrificing control and consent over data. In a future where trust is paramount, our approach to technology, data, and innovations requiring empowering people with greater control over their information's use. When trust is lacking, it's no longer a moral issue. It can become a barrier to digitalization. And in an article which I read recently, the author raised a point that data is the new oil. And if so, trust is the new currency. And with that, I'd like to start the panel discussion by sharing the first question. So maybe we'll start off with Brett, right? Brett, what is your view about the use of data changing the way we work and the value that it brings?
Easy question to start off with. Thanks, Ken. Really big topic. So the first thing we need to understand is what are the industries that are probably most affected by this. And the industry that we're going to talk about today, we put into three buckets. It is the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. And historically, those three industries brought together are the creators and curators of data. They always have been, and they always will be. If you take a look around you now in this room, you look at the ceilings and the walls and the floors and the stage and the lights, someone, somewhere, a while ago, has designed that using, I would argue, a digital tool, and probably argue even more, it's probably our tools that they've been using to do that design. So they are creating not only a physical object, but they're doing it from a digital product, and they're leaving a digital legacy. They're creating data. So that's kind of the basis in which we think about data in those three industries. If we think about, let's just say, a major infrastructure project, say a new road or a new rail line, from the point or the actual moment that someone even thinks that that might be a good idea, they are using data to inform that decision-making process. It might be historical data, it might be GIS data, it might be planning data, cost data, any type of data. And when we think about the creation of that project, data is created through that whole capital expenditure process. Now, historically, that's kind of where the data ended, right? It was used to inform engineering, architecture, construction, and when it was handed over to the public sector, who typically finance and manage a lot of these infrastructure projects, they were handed over a set of paper. They were the keys to the project. 100 sheets of paper that said, here's your road project. Now, the capital expenditure is a really expensive part of an infrastructure project, but I would argue the most expensive part of that infrastructure project is the next 100 years that rail line or that road has to be managed in the operational phase. And what's happening in our industry is that we're moving from handing over sheets of paper when the project finishes to a digital asset. And that's informing how we operate things in a digital world and a digital environment. That's how we look at cost models for the next 30, 40 years. So data for us in these industries is absolutely critical, and our business is absolutely laser focused on today, not only having a 3D complex asset, but also the data behind it, which helps inform those decisions. So data for us is everything, absolutely everything.
Brett, thanks for your point. So Khalil, do you have anything to add on?
Yes, thanks Brett, thanks Ken. I think from my organization perspective today, where we are, we have been collecting data a lot, as what Brett mentioned, I think, even before the digital transformation. At this point of time today, we are still looking at how then we can optimize best the data that we have collected. And I think COVID-19, who I would say or mention our Chief Transformation Officer today, have changed the way we work as compared to 5 or even 3 years ago. And this really changed the way the mindset shift or a paradigm shift in terms of how we collect data, how we share, we collaborate and coordinate across the whole value chain and across the building life cycle, from design, construction, all the way to operation and maintaining the building. So I think on that perspective, it's become very important. There needs to be a trust underlying this, build on the trust to even collaborate effectively among all the different stakeholders. And we are talking about ecosystem partners, huge ecosystem partners where, you know, a lot of data are collected. But I have to be, again, be pragmatic about things. I think today we are still conventional in that sense. But at the same time, people are seeing more value moving forward, how we can do things differently. Again, I think we are living in uncertain times. 2 years ago, we are talking about COVID-19. Today, we don't know what will happen next. There was a Suez Canal. So all this supply chain disruption to the industry, we were quite impacted in that sense, right? So how then we can ensure that all these valuable data that we collect can mitigate some of this. Beyond just collecting, we are also looking at how we can have a unified data platform. I'm sure in the built environment industry, you are familiar, we have this term, a common data environment. Today, beyond just moving towards common data environment, we are looking at a connected data environment, how all this data, metadata, can be connected and interoperability across the different building and project life cycle. So that's our perspective, Ken. Maybe Samuel, you can share a bit.
Thanks, Khalil. Yeah, so the problem with being the last speaker, they speak basically what I want to say. Most of the parts are similarly we face in LTA. A large part of the data that we work on for the project, collect from the project, helps influence typically the project nature. They have the diagnostic information of the project in nature. And I think like what Khalil mentioned, because of COVID, things have shifted. And also we are facing high inflation with high CPI. This data that we collect now at this juncture for our infrastructure delivery would then set a new base for us to refer against the trend that was not unconventional for the past 5 to 10 years. So with that, it helps us also to understand better how our procurement process or even our project delivery, all this data let us know whether how are we performing in this kind of climate. But in terms of operation maintenance, as what Khalil mentioned, typically for LTA, all this data we collect during the construction phase is important because it helps shape the end of where we do operation maintenance, which is like decades to maybe even a century, like where infrastructure are made to last. And beyond that is where we talk about even asset and infrastructure renewal, where this information will help us how to decommissionize the project and then rebuild new, better infrastructure. So it helps us in a big way in terms of how it shapes us previously, where we just have data to just deliver a project for time, cost, and quality. But now we are looking at all the project data we collect now helps us into the future, forward planning, and help us to foresee what we can do with the data for our future purposes.
Hey, thanks, Samuel. So may I proceed to the next question, right, which is critical, right, is as we embark in a lot of these digitalization projects, what is your view about cloud? How critical is it for our modern project delivery? So Khalil, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Ken, for this question. I think underlying this, we know is a continuous journey for us within the organization, right? We need to continuously improve, explore. That's where innovation come into play, right? We always start off with a small scale implementation, and obviously build on this small little success and celebrate that little success, and then we will continue to improve and change the way how we deliver a project in that aspect. Gone are those days where, you know, now there's a few strategies here that is at play. First, obviously, you know, the industry, we were impacted. Now, in terms of human resources, it's very difficult. So we need to continue to change the way we do things to be more productive. Second, we are looking at how do we then attract new talent into the organization. And with technology to enable us and attract new talent, we must change the way we do things with digital platform, with data. And there's a very clear purpose-driven approach in this case, what we want to do. Again, like I said, two things just now. We talk about increasing our productivity, right? Moving away from some of these laborious, mundane process that we have done previously. And then second, streamlining this process to attract new talents. So this have always been our approach, how we deliver project.
Hey, thanks, Khalil. So Samuel, from the perspective of our public sectors, right, do you share the same kind of challenge that Khalil faces? And in your opinion, right, is cloud critical for you in delivering all this digitalization exercise?
Yeah, actually, for the government sector, particularly, you know that, I'm not sure how much of you all are familiar with the data isolation that we used to have. In terms of the whole of government, we have, you know, like China wall previously, and COVID, thanks to COVID, it helps also to open up a lot of these opportunities for us, whereby we can leverage on cloud technology. Previously, it's very closed, and we do not have the luxury that private sectors like, you know, Boustead, Khalil, they have a lot of options to leverage on technologies that associated with clouds. We could not have that opportunity because of security concerns. So we developed a system called Insight, a common data environment, where we deploy on the government commercial cloud. So that's a game changer to us because that breaks down the typical way of how we collaborate with the private sector. Previously, Khalil, we just talked about lunch. We used to exchange information with thumb drives and CDs, lots of CDs. And these CDs become like frisbees, you know, and you keep in the cupboard or keep under the desk collecting dust, and you cannot rationalize or find the single source of truth. So with cloud, with CDEs, which we developed, it helps us to have information, single source of truth. And not just that, it springboard innovation, where it helps us to bring new field technologies, not just for construction phase, where you can bring like the insight or your beam to field to the ground. You can access information on the go. You are able to then do measurements using augmented reality with the digital tools, and you won't be hanging, you know, AO papers with you to site to do inspections and whatnot. So all we can use e-forms, digital processes, and we can even sync up with the cloud where whatever is caught on the field, once we get back to office, everything has been submitted. We don't need to sit there and do processing, post-site work processing. So that is a huge game changer to us. Yeah.
Maybe I'd like to add to what Samuel mentioned. I think for us, again, as a private sector, it's not all beautiful and sunshine, you know, moving into cloud. Honestly speaking, there were challenges. It's been a very close industry traditionally. People are not open to sharing data, right? Having a common data environment, you create that transparency. But having that transparency, there are also advantages and disadvantages. So we are looking at the advantages today. There's a lot of accountability for different parties throughout each of these life cycle. Earlier on, I mentioned from design, construction, all the way to asset and maintenance of the building. So that's where we continue to drive and how it gives value to each of the stakeholder in the project life cycle. right? I think again, when we talk about change and being a change agent in the organization, it was not easy. There was a lot of barriers. People were not willing to collaborate or share freely. You have the platform available for them, but they continue to use, for example, emails, or even way back 5 years ago, we were exchanging CD, you know, this at that time. So it was quite painful. But again, like I said, we move on, we continue to improve, show value to each of these stakeholders, both internal stakeholder, external stakeholder, how we can be more productive in that sense, and what kind of value it brings to them in terms of accountability and managing some of the information latency. Again, because of the dynamics of the construction, this is very important, right? At most time, we talk about how do we get the latest information. With all this data that is available, there's digital tracking, digital footprint, there's no more arguing, even in office or on site. So these are some of these valuable, tangible benefit. And of course, there's some intangible benefit. I think today, because of all this digitalization, using of digital platform, collecting data, we have started issuing tablets to the people on site. So they get more interested, they see value that how this data can be collected and use it on their day-to-day operation. So I think this is the kind of thing that we are seeing, continue to evolve, and I hope the industry itself will move along this direction. Thanks.
So definitely, Brett, because we need to tap on your years of experience with all this project in Australia, right? Why not give us your global perspective about this?
Yeah, I like to break things down to really the first principles, and I love what you said. And if we think about the industry that we're talking about, which is engineering, construction, and architecture, we are a very, very low trust industry. So that's the first thing that everyone needs to understand. We are a highly litigious industry. So that the general public looks at a building being built or a road being built. What they don't see is the litigious nature of the things that are going on in the background. The cloud really is the catalyst for digital transformation of the industry. Thinking about that low trust environment, there was a study done, I think it was either the start of last year or end of last year by FMI, and they state that 95.5% of all data in engineering and construction goes unused. That's just data waste. Now, it's worse than that, because for a lot of public sector projects, that's the public's money, right? The public sector procures information and it goes to waste because we're such a low trust industry. We don't guarantee, we don't warrant the information that we have. So we need to think about how we better use that information. The cloud is the catalyst for this. We are also a very, very decentralized industry. Information across our entire sector is completely decentralized. The last thing I want to say about the cloud is that many, many businesses that we work with, big, big, big multinational businesses, are a sunrise to sunset business. So they'll do the design in Singapore or Sydney in that time zone, and when they clock off at 5 p.m, Europe picks up the design. Now, you can't do that without the cloud. The cloud enables that. So there's a huge productivity benefit by using the cloud. The other thing with the cloud, just very quickly, is around the security nature of the cloud. I know we're going to talk about that, but having a solid common data environment, a centralized work package of where information sits, means that if I need to get to the information, the right information at the right time, I can, because that information will be made available to me. One of the best days of my life 15 years ago was when someone bought me a Blu-ray disc reader, right? We used to exchange Blu-rays with all this masses of information on it, and we thought we were so incredible and so funny and so smart because we had these Blu-rays going around in the post. Now, that's a highly insecure environment. So how far have we come? We've come a long way. The cloud is that catalyst.
Thanks, Brett. So, Samuel, since that you're from the public sector, and I think the next question is really dear to your heart, right? In your view, why is the security of information essential for digital transformation?
Okay, so for infrastructure, well, what Brett mentioned that firstly, in the construction industry, we are all very safeguard. We safeguard our value chain safeguards their information and are willing to share. So that helps to the security in mind, be it access policies or be it cyber securities and whatnot. We feel that that is key to us on two fronts. One is to ensure the integrity of the information that is in the cloud, because we need to make sure that the right people, the hands of the information is massive, right? With infrastructure, there's thousands of very intricate data that we have on the infrastructure. And given the wrong hands, that could be detrimental to our safety, public safety as well as in terms of personal data protection as well, right? Some of these business entities have contract information, costing and whatnot, they're all there. So those are something that's really important for us as a security aspect. But the other part of it is that we need to ensure that to build the trust between the different stakeholders or different authors of information that shares on the cloud, that security is essential because they need to know that wherever this information is shared is purely strictly with just the client, which is the government agency or whichever private agency they're talking about. They would be the ones who hold the data and do not share across to the competitors. So there are two areas these are two key areas to me, all right, but notwithstanding that, we see that as things goes on, when we get more and more data, we have to also be mindful to not have infobicity, where, as what Brett mentioned, we are procuring a lot of information but not put to good use. But now with digital, we are able to better tag information, purge off outdated information so that you maintain the right data capacity footprint in the cloud storage, and we do not waste taxpayers' money in that sense. Yeah. So these are key things in my mind at the moment.
So, Khalil, what is your view about security?
Yeah, I think very important, definitely. Earlier you mentioned about data being a new currency, right? So similarly, you need to make sure it's secured. So again, with this new digital trust, that is ongoing, and especially for our organization, we ensure that a lot of data security in place, a lot of framework and governance, making sure this data. Beyond that, we are talking about integrity. And I think one of the things that we are focusing on is also ethics in the use of data, right? So as we are collecting a lot of data along the way, how can we ensure that these data are not being abused beyond to what they are going to be used for? I see, these are some of the things. It's a work in progress. I'm not saying that we have resolved some of this, but definitely working with a lot of partners, ecosystem partners plays a big part for us because, we are sharing with not just internal, but also external stakeholder. So security, data security become very important for us. And that's the reason why having a very secure platform. Today we have used a lot of our technology partners such as Autodesk, give us that confidence that most of our data are secured to be shared among different stakeholders. Thanks.
Hey, thank you, Khalil. So, Brett, for you to add on, your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything really, because it helps us move, as I said, from this really low trust environment, and it will help us unlock, I don't want to say a high trust environment, but not low trust. And it will be the catalyst for that. I mean, there's a lot of critical assets that are now stored in the cloud. There's a lot of critical infrastructure assets, water assets. Now, the way that they've been managed historically has not been through the cloud. So, really insecure environments for some of these critical assets. But also, security means if I need access to that information, am I the right person to have access to that information? Should I be accessing that information? But trust is both ways. I mean, as a technology provider, probably the largest technology provider, we need to really honour that commitment between the industry and our customers in that we need to be good digital custodians. That's the first thing I would say. The other thing, and you touched on it when we talk about integrity, there's a huge move to use AI and machine learning in our industry. And not so much for insights, which I think if you look at fintech and e-commerce, and they're mining a lot of this information and they're gaining insights. think about a world where we have engineers being engineers and architects being architects. Right now, they're sitting at a workstation and they're doing things that I would tell you is very close to data entry, right? They're not doing engineering. They're sitting at a computer and they're tapping away. We need to unlock them and make them do engineering. Having security and a highly secure environment, having them access the right information will unlock those productivity benefits. We have a shortage of engineers globally. We don't know. We've got all these projects to build. We don't know where we're going to get them from. We've got all these buildings to build and design. We don't know where we're going to get contractors from, and we don't know where we're going to get architects from. So security really is the foundation for everything. Lastly, when we think about, and I want to touch on AI, because security and AI and information is critical. When we use AI, typically for certain parts of design, we need to draw on history. We need to understand what has been designed previously so that we can automate what we do in the future. So think about the design of a car or a building or a room, or even a linear piece of infrastructure, a railway system. A lot of the rules that go into that, not so much the aesthetic, so we can't pretty much design for is something pretty, but we can do things like design rules for roads and highways and for rail. We need to be able to automate and start unlocking that because we don't have enough engineers, but we need to do that in a secure way. If we're not doing that in a secure environment, then we've got to go back to first principles, and I can see us starting to use paper again, which will be a disaster.
Thanks, Brett. So thank you, the panelists, right, for sharing your insights on the topic. And I'd like to end the panel discussion by summarizing our discussion point. I think first and foremost, we all agree, right, to emerge stronger from this COVID, we have to continue to drive digitalization of the built environment. And that is only possible when we work collectively on projects and harness digital solutions, right, to improve productivity. But the underlying of all this is, moving from an industry that's traditionally low trust, right, into a high trust environment. Then trust is central to every one of us who are the professional in the industry. And it's going to become even more important for the whole sector as a whole as we move forwards to the future, right? So to drive productivity, we need to move on, and that forms the basis where we need to build up trust amongst the ecosystems and the players within the ecosystem. Yeah. With that, we end our panel discussion. Thank you.